please, please don't fall. The words echoed through his mind, unable to be whispered. Couldn't even breathe. He was holding his breath, trying not to breathe in the dust of that tiny space as he watched below. A spoon that only a few hours ago had been used to feed him might now be his downfall. And there it was, precariously perched. One wrong move, one sudden shift, and all would be lost. Sweat covered his brow. His body was tense. He glanced over at his wife, who, thanks to the sleeping pills he'd been able to give her, was quiet and resting. Don't fall, or we'll die. Not just us, but the other family. The family hiding on the other side of the organ. 2 years we've been quiet. 2 years we've been in this space. And all of it could be for nothing if the spoon fell. He watched, he waited. He was quiet as the Dutch Nazi police searched the space right below where they were hiding. They were looking for weapons. They didn't know that he was there. After a few moments, not finding what they were looking for, the police turned and left. And finally, he could exhale. Finally, he could move again. Just a little bit. Just enough. He could breathe. But it wasn't over. This is the story so common to many during World War II in Nazi-occupied Europe. This is a story that comes from a church in Rotterdam, a church that wasn't part of the establishment, but a church that said that no one deserved to be killed simply because of their religion, simply because of their ethnic heritage, simply because they didn't conform to the particular ideals of the government and the people in power. For this family, the ending was a happy one. About 6 months after this happened, the war ended. The Nazis were defeated, and this man and his wife were reunited with their children. Together they forged a new life here in the United States. But they never, ever liked organ music again. I know, it's sad, Michelle. But when your hiding place is a small room barely big enough for 2 people and a mattress, where you have to stay all day long because if anyone heard you moving around up there as people came and went from the church, you would be captured, you would be arrested, you would be tortured and probably eventually killed, the organ takes on a somewhat different flavor. This space that we hallow as sacred and holy and safe suddenly becomes a place that is full of fear and tension and uncertainty. The story was related by this couple's daughter many years later, who has passed it on to her daughter. And in telling the story, the interviewer asked them, "Why do you tell it? Why do you still tell this story?" She said, "It's all we've got." See, we thought if we were quiet and we hid, it would work out great for us. And for us, it did. But for many people, it didn't. And so, if by telling our story, one person is helped, then we have taken our stand. I have to admit, I can hardly imagine what it must have been like for them to be in that kind of a position. To have, simply because of their heritage and their belief, the fear of death constantly upon them. Not from roving gangs, not from a few pundits, but from the government itself. The police coming to kill them, coming to take them away, coming to destroy their family, simply because of who they were and what they believed. I may not understand it, but there are plenty of Christians and Jews and Muslims and countless others who do understand what it means to live in a space of persecution, who understand what it means to live in a place where merely admitting that you believe something or showing that you are from somewhere is a death sentence. Elijah the prophet experienced this. He went and did the work of God. Israel was ruled by an evil king who had been turned away by his foreign wife, and they worshiped the god of Baal. And in that final showdown on the mountain, we all remember this flannel graph Sunday school story, right? In that final showdown on the mountain, Elijah, all by his lonesome, builds a small little altar. And though those hundreds of prophets of Baal pray all day, beat themselves and whip themselves and sacrifice on the altar, nothing happens. And then little, poor, weak Elijah comes along. He douses the altar with water. He sacrifices upon it. He kneels down in front of it. He prays. And whoosh! Fireball out of heaven lights the thing on fire. And the crowd is both terrified and amazed. And then, part of that icky bit of the Bible that we don't like so much, Elijah and his assistants whip out their swords and they slaughter those prophets of Baal. A lot of good it did them. Shortly after that, Ahab gets back to his wife Jezebel and she decides that Elijah is going to get it. And Elijah suddenly isn't so bold or powerful anymore. He's on the run. And he continues to go farther and farther away from where people are, out and out into the wilderness, out into those empty spaces. He's trying to find a place where he can hide. And first, he starts off under a scrub brush. Spends a couple of days there. And a messenger of the Lord finds him and nourishes him and says to him, "Get up. There's still farther to go." Eventually he comes to one of God's holy mountains. And there he finds a cave, a dark place where he can hide even better, where he can go even deeper. And he hears a voice that says to him, "Why are you here, Elijah? Why are you here, Elijah?" And then all kinds of things start happening. There's a strong wind, so strong that it knocks over boulders and rocks. But God's not in the wind. And then there's an earthquake that shakes the very ground, that makes everything unsteady. But God's not in the A roaring fire. Fire not unlike the fireball that came down and lit the altar. But this time, God's not in the fire. Instead, out there in this expansive space, out in the middle of nowhere, with no one, with nothing, God showed up with the sound of silence. Thin and quiet. Brothers and sisters, we have entered into spaces like these all too often in our lives. Not only as individuals, but also as congregations. We have looked at the world around us. We've seen its pain. We've seen its problems. We've seen the ways in which we might be hurt by it. How we might be insulted because of our belief. How we might be turned away because of where we come from. How we might not be accepted. But the threat to us has not been our lives, and yet still, this space is a place where we thought we could turn for sanctuary, and too often we have found it a place where our worst fears are realized, where we cower together and hide from the world outside, uncertain, unsure, unable to go forth and really trust that God is going to be with us, unable to believe that there is a kingdom for us out there. As I was thinking about this passage today, I wondered how these verses at the end of the Beatitudes might be read in another context, in another community. I wondered how they might be read by some of the families who come from the other side of the tracks. Those families who feel that they're always struggling to get ahead but never quite able to do so. I wondered, how might this text be read by our African American brothers and sisters in light of the recent conflict with law enforcement these past few weeks? How might they read these texts? How might they understand persecution? How might they understand what it means to come from a place and be a people who are rejected out of hand simply because of what they look like, simply because of where they come from? I wondered about these things. And I wondered what it might look like for us as we enter into this space, to move from here in these hallowed halls to there. I wondered. It's interesting to me that as we read Jesus' words in the Beatitudes, almost all of them are promises. Happy, blessed are those who, for they will be. Happy are those who seek mercy, who give mercy, because they shall receive mercy. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for justice. They will be filled until they are fed. But Jesus doesn't use future promises at the beginning or at the end of his teachings. Rather, he uses the present. He begins by saying, happy are those who are hopeless, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And then he concludes by saying, happy are those who are persecuted. Happy are those who are hated for doing righteous things. Happy are they, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And in that space in between the presence of the kingdom is where we find those promises. But to find the promises in the middle, we've got to live in the spaces on the outside. We've got to be willing to believe that there is a kingdom that is already here. We've got to be willing to step outside of our hiding places. We've got to be willing to step outside of our safe spaces, spaces where organ music still brings us joy, spaces where this still is a happy and a holy place. We've got to step outside of those and those future promises and get out into the unfamiliar places, the unkind places, the places where hopelessness lives, the places where persecution are a daily reality for people because of what they look like, because of what they believe, because of where they come from. We've got to step out into those places if we want to see the kingdom right now. For it's there, Jesus says, that the kingdom is ours. And as we enter into those spaces, I think we'll begin to understand more and more all of the promises that make up the center of the Beatitudes. We'll begin to understand better what it means to hunger and thirst with deep yearning for righteousness. We'll begin to understand what it means to offer mercy in a world that only offers vengeance. We'll begin to understand what it really means to live into seeking the will of God, of trying to have a pure heart. And we've got to go. We've got to get out of our hiding spaces, or they will kill us. The story I shared with you at the beginning, I mentioned that the wife of the man had to be put on sleeping pills so that she wouldn't fidget and make sound. Because of that 2.5 years of living on sleeping pills and being confined to that small space, she spent the rest of her life in a stupor because she couldn't get through a day without it. That's what the hiding place cost her. Our hiding places may seem safe. They may seem good. And at times, they may even seem holy. But I think that God is asking us the same question that he asked Elijah. Why are you here? Why are you here? I'm not going to show up in a wind. I'm not going to show up in an earthquake. I'm not going to show up in a fire. I'm not going to make any big and miraculous moves for you. Why are you here when you should be out there? Why are you here when you should be with my people? Why are you here, Elijah? Why are you here, church? Jesus call to his disciples reminds us that what we have been called to is a life that is not an easy one. It is a life that will result in our ridicule. As Paul says, the gospel is foolishness to those who believe they have wisdom. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that in times of crisis and violence we should promote the ways of peace and reconciliation and justice. It doesn't make any sense that we should offer forgiveness to the offender, that we should offer mercy to the merciless. And yet that's what Jesus has asked us to do. It doesn't make any sense that we should continue to do good to those that hate us. It doesn't make any sense that when someone slaps us across the face, we should turn the other cheek, or when someone forces us to carry a heavy burden, we carry it with them another mile. It doesn't make any sense. And yet, Jesus says, when we do those things, when we enter those spaces, that's where we find the kingdom. That's where we find Jesus, is in those spaces, in those places. Not hiding behind safe walls, safe doctrines, safe dogmas, safe ideals, but rather going out into the world and seeking out those who themselves have been relegated to the hiding places of this life and saying, "Come out." Going forth as God has called us to be with his people and saying to them, "Why are you here when you could be here? Why are you living a life locked into pain when you could be living a life full of joy? Why are you living a life full of bitterness when you could be living a life full of compassion?" But we've got to go. We've got to be there. We've got to be among those people, in those places. We've got to get out of our hiding spaces so that other people can be set free from their hiding spaces. No longer debilitated, no longer restricted, no longer held down, but freed. And this is why Jesus can say to his disciples, "Happy are you. Happy are you, and full of joy when these things happen." When people hate you for speaking peace into violence. When people revile you for speaking forgiveness into vengeance. When people tell you that you should sit down and shut up when you say that love is what it's all about. When you offer grace to people everyone else has said don't deserve it. This is why we can be glad. Because it's when we enter those spaces, when we crawl in behind and through and around, that we begin to experience that present kingdom of God. When that moment of exhale occurs. When we're able to grieve with those who grieve. When we're able to laugh with those who laugh. And when we're able to witness the work of God transforming